Do you want to learn how to tune electronic fuel injection live in person with the guys from RealTuners? We have 2-day courses in dyno shops all across the country. You can register for these at RealTuners.com and click on RealTuners Live Classes. For more information or to make a reservation, go to RealTuners.com or message us on Facebook at RealTuners LLC. Now, about those classes. When are they, you might ask? March 30th and 31st, late model Dodge and Mopar factory ECU tuning with Rick Tapp in Dallas-Fort Worth. April 13th and 14th, a Level 1 EFI course at Endless Performance in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. April 27th and 28th, an advanced class at 417 Motorsports in Springfield, Missouri. May 18th and 19th, a standalone EFI Level 1 class at 417 Motorsports in Springfield, Missouri. June 15th and 16th, a Level 2 advanced course in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at Endless Performance. And of course, we will be trying to schedule more classes and more dates throughout the year, so keep checking back for more info. Tonight's guest is the former owner of the East Coast Timing Association, and he's a guy that has done a lot of work on a ton of cars that we all are familiar with. Joe Timney from Delaware Chassis Works is on tonight to talk to us. And as usual, we have our normal panel of hosts. Bill Fowler of Big Hat Racing, Chad Reynolds of Bangshift.com, James Short of Shore Tuning, John Bewley of Little John's Motorsport Solutions, Mark Dalquist of Throttles Performance, Scott Clark of RealTuners.com, Scott Evans of Helix Tuning, Bry Klemp from Clapped Out, Tom Sewell of Fuel Injector Development, Dan Parker, the movie star. He's blind in one eye and can't see out the other. And possibly a few of our previous guest hosts will pop their heads in and chat as well. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Now let's get this show on the road. Welcome back, everybody. RealTuners episode 81. We have a whole lot of people on in the background tonight. We'll get to in just a second. We got Joe Timney of Delaware Chassis Works. This guy's tuned a whole lot of fast cars. It's going to be a lot of fun talking to him. Without further ado, let's see who we got tonight on in this big giant crowd of people here behind us. Say hello, everybody. Who all's here?
Hey, Scott's here. What's going on?
Hello, everybody.
Everybody and their uncles here on the line.
There's a list, man. Oh my goodness.
I see Bewley. I see Dalquist. I see Mike Majacek.
Me, guys.
I see David Vizard. I see Bill Fowler.
Yes.
Brian Barnhill's back again. Dan Parker's hanging out with us. Man, he looked good in that suit earlier.
Talk about that.
Man, that suit. Listen,
That suit is money.
Dan Parker, big. I'm telling you.
He needs a more Italian name. Dan Parkerini, or something like that.
Something like that. Something mafioso.
Yeah.
That is
Dan Soprano.
Yeah, Dan Soprano. There we go. Yeah, I'm telling you right now, if your wife, your better half, does not let you get married in that suit, there's just so much wrong in the world.
I need to rethink it.
I mean, dude, that is just, get her in like a 30s,
Yep.
Get
Evans, can you get Jen
Somebody's
Parker's
lost
suit
for words.
Right. I can try. Give me a few minutes.
Yeah, you gotta go get this suit off his Facebook page and post that for everybody.
Yeah, you got to get it on the rolling video.
If for some reason the producers at the Steve Harvey show said no, I just don't understand.
Because you couldn't go on Steve Harvey show outshining Steve.
Yeah,
because you would be outshining Dan. You would be outshining Steve in a heartbeat wearing that suit.
So Does everybody know what we're talking about? Dan recently went on the Steve Harvey show. We're lucky to have him back because his head hasn't inflated enough yet. But he went on the Steve Harvey show to show off some of his cool toys he's got, and he proposed to his girl on the Steve Harvey show live, and she didn't see it coming, and that was the coolest thing ever. And now I'm mad at you because all the rest of us with our girls I'm like, how am I going to top that? She's looking over at me and she's like, man, your friend did that?
And he's blind?
Damn.
Scott.
Yes.
I thought your problem with proposing was wondering which one to propose to.
Oh, Jesus. Come on, man.
Man, how you yeah, baby. Scott's a fairly big boy. He doesn't fit underneath Prevost buses very well.
He's going to leave a mark on the road.
Evan, can you put up my video and show them what I'm working on right now?
Yeah, I'm working on trying to get Dan's picture real quick.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead. Just let me know when you're ready. I want to show them where I'm at.
Yeah, there's Dan's picture coming up right now.
No,
on the Facebook page.
Video to be put up that purports to show where he might be. Interesting.
Oh, okay. You don't mean to do that? I won't. Whatever.
If anybody's looking for a good suit like that, you can go to Looking Good Fashions in Columbus, Georgia. For $175, you can get that entire ensemble with the hat and the shoes.
Ensemble.
How much extra do we need for the cane?
How much is the cane?
The cane is a few dollars extra, but don't think they don't have them down there. My buddy asked if those are bowling shoes a while ago. My buddy asked if those are bowling shoes.
I have this vision of the church or wherever you're getting married, of all the people in the audience there, all dressed like that. That would be a vision.
I would drop if they did like a 30s speakeasy themed wedding and he got married in that suit. I would drop $500 for a suit to go to that wedding.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but
I would be there in a heartbeat.
175.
Dan, I was raised in South Philly, man. You'd have fit in back in that day.
Well, I'm gonna walk to the house real quick. Tell the future Mrs. Parker that the whole team said that we got to have that 30s thing.
She's getting vetoed, homie. Vetoed.
So she can go live here in just a second.
Dan, do you even remember how pretty that girl is? I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if I thought she might be blind. Seriously, that is one pretty girl. I can't wait to meet her. I got to come to this wedding. That is one pretty girl. Insane.
I guess you already went to bed. So I better not go in here and disturb that. The chihuahua will go nuts trying to bite my head off.
RealTuners Radio does not endorse making fun of people who are differently able.
If they can't see.
Oh, Lord.
We tune for our attorney help, so it's race season. Bring it on. They need something to barter with.
Should we just call it a night at this point?
Oh, my God. Yeah, it's going nowhere fast.
Well, we can't go up from here. I mean, everything else is going to be back compared to the suit conversation.
Old Dapper Dan done ruined the conversation.
Oh no, man! This is elevated. This ain't ruined.
Hey, let's introduce our guests, shall we?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the reason I logged on for Joe.
Hell yeah.
So tonight we've got Joe Timney on, and I have no idea who he is. So somebody else has to introduce him.
I can take it from here. I kind of know him personally on a personal level. Yeah, it just happens to be my father-in-law. Lucky me. So,
yeah, that's a real personal level, all right.
It's real personal. It works out pretty good. Yeah. So I'm down visiting in South Florida down here. It was supposed to be warm, but it's a 40-mile-an-hour wind and in the 50s right now, so it's uncomfortable. But,
I had that same problem tonight in Vegas.
Yeah. So right here with us, we got Joe Timney, Delaware Chassis Works, going on his 40th year in business. He's a 2019 Dry Lake Racing Hall of Fame inductee, a 200-mile-an-hour club at Bonneville, and the former owner of the East Coast Timing Association. And I'm going to let him kind of give himself his introduction.
We have a hell of an echo coming from you guys.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I can turn. Is that better?
There we go.
I think so.
Okay. All right. Yeah. When he's talking, I'll mute myself. He just has some non-computer skills for muting, but yeah, we're good. So without further ado, I'll let Joe introduce himself and talk about how he got into all this mess. And we'll talk about some safety stuff, fire systems, seat belts, roll cage padding, and funny car cages and drag week cars. We'll try to see if we can get through all that stuff. So,
and I also want to hear about the Dry Lakes Hall of Fame, because that is a huge, huge freaking deal and super hard to get into. But carry on, take your time. I won't let you forget.
Well, guys, thank you for inviting me on. My face already hurts from laughing so hard. I was born in South Philly, the oldest of 8 kids. I was born poor, and I kept every penny of it. Kids in the neighborhood had fast cars. I got hooked about 12 years old and started helping the guy across the street with his 32 5-window coupe racing at AGCO. It went downhill after that. At 15, I had a piece of crap 55 Chevy that I broke every single thing at least once in the car, but I was hooked for life. Family moved to a larger home and brought us to Wilmington, Delaware. And there I fell in love with the local car club guys, and we hit it off. We had a lot of senior members that raced and afforded all of us younger guys some great guidance. Steve Kanuka and his brother, Fred Faulkner, guys, Ross Donovan to Ben Bolt. We went from there, started drag racing with all those guys, had a good time, but I needed an education. Right out of high school, I went to work for General Electric and served a tool and die apprenticeship in Southwest Philly, commuting from Delaware every day. And they sent me to Temple University for a manufacturing engineering degree. Excuse me 1 second, guys. Landspeed, I need to call you back. Bye.
I bet I know who he's talking to. I talked to some people today about a project we're working on together.
That was Landspeed Louise.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was Keith Turk.
Oh, that too. You know,
no, he'd still be talking. If it was Keith Turk, we'd have to say goodnight.
Yeah. From working at General Electric, they shut the plant down on me and went to work for S&W Race Cars for a couple of years. And my chief job was to build fixturing for the new Econo dragster that just came into tuition with NHRA. And we built some chassis jigs and fixturing to speed up the whole manufacturing process so that the cars were affordable. From S&W, I had worked for DuPont for a little period of time. I went back to DuPont. But I started helping Neil Marr on his fuel car, and every race we'd make a little gadget or something that was easier to work on the car. And a lot of the other racers wanted one. And in 1979, I opened the doors of Delaware Chassis Works, working nights and weekends. Working for DuPont had great benefits. I made great money there. And it was that steady paycheck that really helped me buy equipment and keep building additions onto my shop. Had a couple of door cars, built a rear engine dragster, and did some super comp racing. But always wanted to go to the Bonneville Soft Flats. And in the mid 90s, I had the opportunity to go to the East Coast Timing Association new event in North Carolina. And it changed my life. I came home and sold my dragster and started land speed racing. Met at the second or third meet. The timing system failed at the ECTA meet. and the normal guy that set it up wasn't there. And I went and fixed the timing system and found out that I was now the new chief timer. That's how you got jobs there. It took a car to Bonneville and had a pretty successful outing with Willie Glass. I don't know if you guys know Willie. He's a Mr. Flathead. We took a Flathead 29 Roadster and ran 0.4 of a mile an hour off the record with 65% nitro in the tank at our first try, which the toughest records anywhere out there are Roadster records. We were pretty proud of that. At that event, the owners of ECTA asked me to drive one of their cars, and actually, when I got done with it, they wanted to take it home and modify the suspension on it so it handled better. For those who don't know, Maxton Track in North Carolina was a World War II glider training base. The runway we ran on was built in 1942 with zero steel except for pins from plate to plate, and it's the roughest place. It rivaled the old Richmond drag strip, if any of you guys have ever ran there. Terrible. You had to open your mouth past the finish line and you'd break your teeth. Very interesting place to race. It was a racer's track. You had to find traction where you could. It was a patched up piece of crap. I ended up partnering with John Beckett and Lionel Williams, and in 2000, I set a couple records in an S10 pickup in 99 and 2000. And in 2000, I drove a Chevette to 213 mile an hour and got in a 200 mile an hour club. Now, this isn't a normal Chevette. It was a comp coupe. The chop was chopped. The wheelbase was stretched to 120 inches and ran a little then it was a 258-inch small block Chevrolet. Probably the weakest motor ever. We probably only had about 11 to 1. I forget the stroke, but it was next to nothing. And the crazy thing is I still have the record here 19 years later. So I don't know whether the class is jinxed for anybody else or what the deal is. But the whole time I was doing that, well, in 1999, the plant I worked at DuPont closed. And I went home and changed my clothes. And instead of working 40 hours for DuPont and 40 hours for me, I just started working 90 to 100 hours a week to pay all the bills. And got involved with land speed racing, and it's been fun ever since.
Somebody was busy then?
A little bit.
Yeah.
We've done a crazy mix of drag cars, hot rods, drag bikes, and land speed bikes and cars. I've done a couple V8 drag bikes for people. A lot of door cars. I've done couple Pro Mod cars, couple 3 or 4 different nitro coupes for that Super Chevy circuit that used to run. Dave Craig Tack was one of them. Just a wild variety of stuff.
From what you were telling me before the show, it sounds like you've even had your wife on a bike.
My wife's been 218 miles an hour on a Hayabusa. And
Damn.
She took a 1,000 Kawasaki at Maxton and in Ohio, and ran 201. And the owner, who raced it a lot, never got past 196 miles an hour. And her second pass, she went 201 and set a record.
Well, you must have a streamlined wife.
Well, she's more than 100 plus pounds lighter than me. I took that same bike that she went. She set a record in Maine at 205, and the next year I could barely get it over 200 with a shitload of nitrous. So there is a difference. I was in the Bonneville 200 mile an hour club and the ECTA 2 club, and I went to Maine and I got in on a bike. I wanted to try something different. It's different. I've driven a lot of dragsters and door cars, and when you're drag racing, I always know I'm at 180, 190 mile an hour because the scenery on the side turns liquid, and it smears right around that speed. Some people don't notice it, especially in door cars. I got on that bike. I couldn't tell how fast I was going with that fairing. All I could tell, the ground was moving really fast underneath of me, and if I rolled my wrist out, it slowed down. That's all I can tell you.
Wow.
It was an interesting ride, though. I like to take a bike to Bonneville and see what that's like. I have the distinction of blowing the rear tire at 233 miles an hour at Bonneville. I like to say it was skill to keep the shiny side up, but it was pure luck. That was not a good day. It worked out okay. We broke a brake rotor for some reason. We just took the brakes off, and I backed the record up the next morning. I just took the back brakes off, and we shimmed the wheels out, and it made it an interesting ride. No brakes.
I have to ask a question. Where's the Chevette at today?
The Chevette was sold to a guy in Maryland, and his crew chief wrecked it in 06 or 07 at Bonneville. It had a 498-inch big block Chevrolet. It was running in over 260 miles an hour, and the salt wasn't that great. And the guy driving had his hand on the steering wheel, palm down at the bottom, and he was whipping the wheel. And anybody that's ever raced at Bonneville will tell you, you don't drive it like a fuel altered. If it starts to move, you do a little input, or ease up on the throttle. And he started whipping it, and it started fishtailing bigger and bigger and bigger, and it spun around backwards. And what we have learned is you hinge your wing, so if it goes backward, the wing will come up off of the struts and flip forward. Otherwise, it takes off like an airplane and goes a couple 100 feet in the air instantly if it goes backwards at speed. It tumbled end over end 8 times and barrel rolled 11 times. And they got $23.50 for it at the scrapyard. The driver was extremely lucky. I had just put a new full cage in the car, of 1 3/4, 134 wall, and rebuilt the funny car cage. And the back of the funny car cage was 156 wall, and it beat the 1 3/4, 134 wall to the dash. The whole front loop was buckled and smashed to the dash. It was 2.5 mile debris field. Drag racing, you've got those concrete retaining walls, and they're absolutely wonderful. They scrub speed off. They do a great job. But at Bonneville, there's nothing to hit. The surface is slick. I've seen a car go on its roof and go 1.25 miles, slightly spinning, sliding on its roof. It's so different than any other racetrack there is.
All righty. Wow.
Can I make a comment here?
Sure.
Yes.
People who've never run Bonneville don't quite realize how involved it can get. I remember doing a Bonneville thing where I was doing the engine for a Buick deal where the boss at Buick wanted, their performance division, who went on to be the performance guy at Chevrolet. Offhand, I can't remember his name, not because he wasn't rememberable, it's because I'm just getting old. Right? So, anyway,
I know.
There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. The
rocking the house.
deal of getting speed it gets down to very, very fussy little details. And so when you go to Bonneville, it's not like you can do lap after lap to refine it. You've got to pretty much have your act together pretty quickly because you don't get that many chances to run. And the other thing is that it often seems that because you're going in a straight line, how dangerous can it be? Well,
exactly.
It's not the ideal deal. Yeah. Our drive, we had this Buick V6, right? And we were trying to have the fastest V6 Buick in the world. We set a record. We went, I can't remember if it was 216 or 213. But in one of the practice runs, the driver spun the car at over 200 miles an hour. Let me tell you, it sure does wake the driver up to take more notice of what you're telling them.
Right?
Yes, exactly. Now, the thing what people don't understand is you're running on 4 to 5 inch wide tires. If you put a wide tire on a car, it literally hydroplanes like you're on water. So the big tire just doesn't work. And then people say, well, you want it light, but you go as fast as you can. And if you're spinning the tires, there's only 2 things you can do. You can either add downforce or weight. If you add downforce, you add drag. So the object here is to put weight in it. Wayne Jessel has a full-size crew cab Dodge truck that's run 264 miles an hour. The truck weighs between 56 and 6,500 pounds, depending on what the salt's like. Jason Lyon wanted to get in the 2 Club, and he brought one of his Pro Stock motors, and they put it in the truck and went to Bonneville. And he made a couple runs and going up through licensing, which is a requirement. They don't care how fast you've been. You're going to start somewhere, and they'll decide where with your credentials, where you start. He wanted to get the weight out of the car, and the crew chief just kind of laughed and said, well, let's get the record. And then, if you want to have a come to Jesus meeting, I'll take all the weight out and you can have all the fun you want.
Oh, I like that, a come to Jesus meeting.
So, Jason went out, he qualified. Well, that night it rained and the salt was pretty slippery. And next morning they said, you got to be really careful. Drive like you have an egg under your foot and little inputs of the steering. It's going to really be tough out there. Jason put it down through there. He didn't run as fast as he did the day before, but he had enough over the record that he got the record. He got his 200 mile an hour club hat. And then he was asked, if you want me to take the weight out and make a run? And he goes, nope, I'm good. I don't have to drive this thing anymore. I'm good. He said, that about scared the shit out of me. And there's a guy that drives a 200 mile an hour Pro Stock car. And we've all seen what they can do for moving around.
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up the point about you've got to have traction either from weight or aero downforce, right? And
yes.
And this is something a lot of people still don't realize. Even some of the new competitors at Bonneville, is that very often Bonneville can be one giant drag strip, and you have to weigh up whether you use weight or downforce, and just how much weight, because you may have a car that sticks to the salt sufficiently, but it may not get up to speed because the salt's not long enough. So you've got these decisions to make, and it's amazing how a small change of maybe 100 pounds of weight can make the difference between the car accelerating a bit faster and still having just enough traction to stay glued to the track, right? So that's it's a bit like a drag racer, fixing his eyes on the track and seeing what it might need to get off the line, or a road racer deciding on what tires to use due to whatever the weather is. But that factor there, I found very how shall I say, the decisions weren't easy. I mean, does that come with experience?
Yes, it does. I'm thankful that when I went there, I had the first time I went there, I had no salt experience. I'm a crew chief on a nitro flathead. I talked him into what people told me. I talked him into adding tabs to the car and building weight bars ahead of time. And I said, we'll go light, we'll make passes, and we'll see where we are. And we can always just add weight as we need it. And we just added a little bit of weight near the back of the car, and it helped. Now, one of the things about aerodynamics when you're accelerating at Bonneville is you run into terminal velocity. You don't have enough horsepower or apply it to the ground to push the car any faster because the wind's holding it back. If you're driving a Roadster, or my first experience driving was an S10 pickup, it's a big blunt front end, and it's like driving with a barn door. And when it reaches terminal velocity, it starts to wander left and right, and you've got to easily corral it. Hands at 10 and 2, and a little bit, till it nudges itself over. There's a phenomenon in Roadsters where a Roadster at a certain speed may need the reverse of steering, like you're used to slipping on snow or ice and the back end's coming around, you turn into the part coming around. Well, Roadsters sometimes the other way will spill air off the front and straighten you out. But at a certain speed, that can change. And all Roadsters are different. So it's seat time for those.
Is that because of how the front wheel and tire package affects the air over the body?
Exactly. Whether it's a street Roadster, a gas Roadster, a modified Roadster, what tread width are you running? How's the car set up? A lot of these cars are rigid frames. And when Bonneville's like a pool table, you don't need suspension. Well, Bonneville's almost never like a pool table anymore. So yes, you need suspension. But suspension only works to a certain speed. And then after that, by the time the shock absorber sees a bump in the track, you're already 30 feet past that bump. And, you can have the best Olin shocks in the world. It's just not going to work at 350, 375 miles an hour. So most of your streamliners, their suspension is the tires. That's just what everybody has learned. Go ahead.
I was just going to say something you I'm sure we'll touch on is that land speed racing covers a lot of surfaces. So for the team that I've worked with at El Mirage is interesting because it's a 1.3 mile course and it's on dirt. Yes. So there's a distinct second set of determining factors as to how you go. And every time you pull patrol at El Mirage and the Roadsters come up, we get an extra announcement over the radio because half of them will go backwards through the timing lights.
Exactly. And El Mirage is it is so tough. I mean, you're fixing Mother Nature. The guys are going out making mud and fixing potholes and trying to groom the track back around. Bonneville, there can be a little of that. Generally, when a lane goes bad, we have to move over, and they groom multiple lanes. So they'll move you over as they see fit. You get a lot of cars spinning, or you'll have a section like this year. The fourth mile was a little bit soft when we first got there. And honest to God, you can be flying down through there and you hit soft salt and the car slows down. You can feel it. And you're dealing with that situation. Now the track started to go away, so they moved us over one lane. I've been to Bonneville where they moved us 5 times. The track was so awful through the course of a week.
So hopefully a lot of you folks are watching the feed on either Facebook or YouTube, because you're seeing a lot of great imagery from a lot of the cars that people are talking about here, some of the construction details, a lot of those other things. So kind of put pictures to concepts here. So sorry, Joe, go ahead.
No, that's fine. One of the things too about racing at Bonneville is, there's no guardrails, there's nothing. So the whole concept there is safety. And when I went there, I had zero appreciation for that safety. I've been a drag racer. I thought I saw it all. Worked for S&W, worked on my own, but spent plenty of time at the tracks. Gone to PRI shows, learned about safety firsthand. You go to Bonneville, and to get through a tech at Bonneville, you just can't even imagine how hard that is. Their rules are way stiffer than any drag strip I've ever been there on any meet ever. But once you have the opportunity to visit a crash site and you're out there 1.5 to 2.5 miles of debris, it's like an airplane crash. And there's a story there that has to be developed, and they have a great crash crew that teaches. When I worked at S&W, I had an opportunity to do some crash investigations with NHRA, and I learned a lot from that, and tried to apply it when I saw a wrecked car and where a section folded and what's going on. I think the biggest thing I see when I went to Bonneville was the first thing I noticed was roll bar padding. I go to a drag strip and I see 6 mile an hour roll bar padding, and that real soft, spongy stuff that you see is rated for 6 miles an hour. And everyone allows to have that nice, soft, squishy stuff. But after 6 miles an hour, it really doesn't do anything. And that number came from Chris, I'm going to butcher his last name, Vandergelt. Oh gosh, having a brain fart. I'm old. He's got ISP in North Carolina that does all the funny car enclosures and top fuel enclosures. Chris had a little seminar at PRI a number of years ago. Before Chris started his business, he did skid pad testing for one of the major containment seat manufacturers. And he has more time on a skid pad testing than any human on earth. And they test all this stuff, helmet tests and crash tests. And he said a piece of tubing in a crash, when your helmet hits the piece of tubing, it might as well be a butcher knife, because it splits the helmet exactly the same way as you put a helmet into a butcher knife. And using that soft foam padding, it ruins the helmet anything over 6 miles an hour. So when I go to a drag strip and I see that soft foam, I cringe, because I know that number. And that big hard roll cage tubing padding, it is made to crush at a certain rate to absorb that energy of the helmet hitting it. For you guys that drive roll cage pro street cars, there is a company that offers a dual density foam. And it's a piece of roll bar padding with another piece over it that's soft. So when your helmet hits it, it's not like banging against that hard stuff. That stuff's readily available. Works really nice. When we do Bonneville cars, we have a rule that your helmet can only move side to side 2 inches total. So I actually build aluminum pads that go on either side of the driver. And then I have this company skive the roll bar padding in flat stock to the thickness I want. And then I always add a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch of the lower, softer durometer stuff. What you find out when your padding is real close to your head and you're driving, and if your helmet touches that padding, it knocks your vision out. And what it does, it makes your eyes bounce and you'll lose your vision. Anybody that's gone through severe tire shake knows that's the exact same sensation. And so it's really hard to be driving at Bonneville and not have your helmet touch that stuff. So I found that the softer stuff really helps a lot. Most of the full containment seats, we have to have a surround in your head, and it must be 13 inches from the back of your head helmet out. So it ensures that in an accident, your head doesn't come down and come under a bolster. They also mandate full cages for all cars, no matter how fast they go. A full door net, because in accidents, we've found that if the seatbelts aren't tight enough, your feet can come up and come out, or you can get an arm around a window net. I look at the window nets on a Pro Stock car, and I don't understand what they're for. Because if your arm can come out around the front of the net, in an accident situation, you could lose a limb. Bonneville's rules came about by blood from someone. And every time there's a real bad accident, a new rule comes out. I lost my racing partner and the founder of the East Coast Timing Association, John Beckett, in 2004 in a crash at Bonneville. And he had built a new car.
Tough.
Pardon?
I said, that's tough.
Yeah. John,
you're not supposed to lose your friends racing.
No. John had built a new car after the team split up. He had quit. He had sold us the East Coast Timing Association because it's impossible to run a race organization and race. I learned that lesson too. Should have listened to John and not bought the thing. But John took it to Bonneville and he had a crash. John was very short and he built a seat and he wanted everybody else to be able to get in the car. So he built the car for somebody 6'3", 6'4", and the funny car cage was real high up, but he had a neck collar, and that's all they required then. And the car was really bad salt. A lot of racers made one pass, pulled off early, put it on the trailer, and went home. It was horrible. And John said, I'm just testing. And he went out and he would put a good run together, and he was running way over 200, probably closer to 250. The car got loose, spun around, and he crashed and went airborne. And it came down on the upper driver's side bar. It tweaked the roll cage 3/4 of an inch off to one side and broke his neck. And after that, they have the John Beckett rule, the full containment seat and head and neck restraint mandatory now. That's a horrible way of upgrading your safety, but that's what's required. It's just, that was a tough one.
For anybody that's familiar with my wreck, I tell everybody the only reason I survived is I had my Hans device on and it properly adjusted. The tethers weren't too loose, because when I went through that wall at 175, it should have, and then it went to tumbling afterwards. It should have definitely broke my neck. But, my Hans device,
Dan. Yeah,
it was my saving grace.
One of the things I like to talk about seatbelts now, I drag raced a lot, and I used to see guys turning around to see where I was. I had a black dragster. It was, it was most guys in Super Comp are running 220-inch wheelbase. I was running a 240. And at night, you had a hard time seeing my car. Everything was blacked out in the front. And I'd see guys turning around in the seat. And I go, how in the name of God did they ever have their seatbelts tight enough? Because I'm a fanatic. I like my shoulders rolled in. I like to be tight. I don't want to bounce around in a car. Loose belts will hurt you bad. At Bonneville, the starter tightens your belts up. And I'm going to tell you right now, you better take a big breath and hold it with all your might, because when he pulls that belt down, you can't breathe. But if I'm having an accident, you want tight belts. And we don't dress for the ride. We dress for the crash. So seatbelts.
Boy, I got to remember that one, right? Can I quote you on that?
Yes,
that
sir,
is such an accurate statement. Because don't dress for the ride. We have to dress for the crash. Don't you think that's pretty neat, guys? Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It tells the story. Hey,
But
can
it's
I
also
interrupt
necessary.
a moment?
Yes.
Fellas, right? My wife's just reminded me I haven't had breakfast yet, right? Because I've been flat out all day. And I think I better go and eat something just to make sure my diabetes doesn't get out of hand here. But when I was on last time, I did mention I was finishing up a video on porting Vortec heads and exposing all the misinformation you get on the internet, which 90% of the videos out there are telling you how to put a lot of time into these heads without any results, right? So I've got a 40-minute video, PowerTech 10, episode 5, and there's all the test results there showing what these screw-ups do. So anybody want to watch it, it's PowerTech 10, episode 5, right? And with that, I will talk to you guys next week, and let's get back to the Bonneville stuff, right?
Yep.
Bye, David.
Okay,
take care of yourself.
I'm going to say good night to everybody, right?
Good night.
Good night, Dave.
Good night.
Right. Cheers.
Oh, we got that short little break here. The roll bar material and SFI padding and dual density stuff that Joe was talking about. Guys on YouTube, Brian Barnhill was commenting a couple places you can buy that stuff. Joe gets all his stuff from BSCI. It's Baker Sam Charlie Indigo.
It was BCSI.
Yeah, it's BCSI, isn't it? That's what I posted. I could be wrong.
Did I write it down wrong, Joe?
Yeah. Yes.
It's BCSI.
Yeah.
Okay. BCSI. Yeah. They have sheets of SFI padding.
Yep.
They actually have that. Also have that dual density stuff Joe was talking about. If you guys have street cars or drag week cars, and you want to keep your head, keep from banging your head around inside there, that dual density stuff, it's nice and mushy on the outside. Then it has that really heavy layer of SFI just below it. That's crash safe basically.
And does you said BCSI makes sheets of the
yeah, you can get
awesome.
Yeah,
What they do is they have it, I think it's 28 inch by 36 inch and it's 5 inches thick, and they will skive it to the thickness you want.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's I buy a piece and I have them skive it inch and a half, and then I get the low density stuff and I have them skive it usually half or 3/4 of an inch. I found that works really nice. And you can make up side paces and panels. I crashed a car at Maxton. I had the wrong parachute on the car before I got educated by Bob Stroud. And at 200, it picked the back of the car off the ground because of the aero package we had on the bottom of this comp coupe. And it turned the car at a 45-degree angle and sent me out in a beam field. And the car got half tipped over, and I landed on the driver rocker panel at almost on the side, and I slammed up the side of the roll cage, and all that was injured was my elbow. And you need to start looking around your car. If you crash, what's going to happen? All the cars I build, anything above your legs has a piece, a 6-inch wide piece of aluminum with turned up ends with SFI padding there. So your shins aren't breaking on the dash. If you have a dash bar that's below the steering column and your legs can come up and hit it, or the dash or a sharp edge, you need to think about crashing a car and where your limbs are going to go and all of that. And land speed racing, we have to have leg restraints if they can come out of the confines of the roll cage and or a full door net. And we have to wear, even with the net, we have to wear arm restraints. I probably wouldn't race without all of that stuff today because I've seen enough incidences where that's important.
I like to add something to that. We talk about, stuff that your body can hit, but also the stuff in the car that can break. I'm pretty sure what caused my blindness is my nitrous bottle mount broke from the chassis. And so I had a 15-pound nitrous bottle slinging around in the car. And I had marks on my helmet. My helmet's cracked across the forehead and cracked across my right chin. And my right arm is completely destroyed. And so I'm pretty sure, between, like you said, the arms flailing around in there and projectiles, going all around in there, that is a double sword. But, that's something everybody needs to look at. You mount it 10 times more than you think, not the minimum, go way above and beyond. Because, I never thought that nitrous bottle mount would break, but it did.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. That's a great point. I never crashed a car before, and I learned a lot from being the one in the car. And there's so much to be learned from people like you. You've had a very violent accident, and you look at some of these cars when they're done, and you need to pause and think about your own safety. What we do is life-threatening, period.
Yeah, and things that
I'm building cars. Go ahead.
I was going to say things that are removable in your car that are things that you take in and out. They don't only need just a solid mount, but they also should have a tether if you can put one on it, a steel wire that mounts to it that can go to another point so that there's an extra level of safety. So if that mount breaks, there's something else to also catch it and at a minimum slow it down, but hopefully retain it and keep it from coming up and hitting you.
Absolutely.
That should not be the line that goes to the bottle, by the way.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. They'll pull out of that fitting in a New York minute every time. Bonneville, one of the things that going through tech and cars at Maxton, and I'm also tech cars at Bonneville, you get to see land speed racing is not like drag racing. Drag racing, most of the pro cars, all the tubes are pretty close to the same location in each one, and the parts are the same location. Bonneville fabricators or car builders build cars in vacuums. They're in the middle of the Tules in Oklahoma or up in northern Michigan. They can't go to a land speed track and look at what everybody's doing. So they rely on pictures and input and a little bit of drag racing and a little bit of their own stuff, and they build these cars. Some of them are scary as hell. I wouldn't sit in them being towed with a pull truck. And some of them are so magnificent it changes your whole outlook of, I never thought of doing it that way. It is, if you've never been to Bonneville, or I tell go and see this, and you can go the tech days. You can hang in tech and watch them tech cars all day long.
So,
and I will guarantee you will not see two cars alike.
How many cars on average would you say just don't pass tech on a given year? Because I've heard some stats on that. But I'd be curious, how many just never pass on their first time through, at least the first year?
It's really a small number because everybody there will help you get it through or run you back to Salt Lake City 10 times till you get it. I know there's probably 10, 12 cars, maybe 15 cars that don't pass. Some years is worse than others.
That's not bad as I thought, but yeah, the whole family camaraderie thing is one thing I've always heard too, and that's why it's always been on my bucket list to do. I just haven't made it out there yet.
When I first went to the land speed race at Maxton, I got to tell you, I was overwhelmed with that feeling. Now, this was 1996. I started drag racing in 1965 at 15, and I felt that I was back in the 60s drag racing because everybody helped everybody. Everybody was friendly. The sport was new. The track owners were happy that you showed up. I mean, it was a wonderful time to get an introduction to racing. It wasn't like dirt racing where the biggest crew wins because they can beat everybody else up. And I've certainly been to some of those shows. And I just love drag racing and land speed racing. There's nobody in the other lane. And, when I broke the D-Gas Comp Coupe record in 2000 at World of Speed at Bonneville, I blew a tire on the first pass and qualified on the record. I got back to the pits while I was going to impound, and I blew the other tire, and then we saw what happened. I needed 2 tires, and they were very rare tires that Mickey Thompson had made for land speed racing. Before I got to impound, there was 2 tires sitting in my pits with a note, "I hope these will work for you." It was the guy's record that I just qualified on.
That's awesome. That's the part of racing that some guys ask why I don't do certain forms of racing, and it's because that's not there. And that's a lot of people ask. I do a lot of drifting crew wise, and I got into it, and I was kind of on the fence, and I started doing it. And it was that same camaraderie. I grew up doing motocross in the early days, and I started doing that. And I was like, oh man, and that's really what it was. It was new. Guys were just stoked that we were coming out and that people were building stuff. And it's changed a little bit, and there's some guys that argue it, but I would say that mentality is still there in the pro level. And, everyone's just so happy that they can do that. I mean, pros have only been around for really 8 years at this point. So that's a huge part of racing that I think gets overlooked by a lot of people.
A couple of,
go ahead.
We have a couple of listener questions I wanted to catch up on.
Okay, go ahead.
When we were talking about the various lanes at Bonneville, Gary Collender wanted to know, do the lanes have an out of bounds line that you're not allowed to cross? Like if you cross the line, does it eliminate or disqualify your run?
You're going to love this answer. At Bonneville, it's all about being timed. And as long as you're between the timing lights, when you go past the 1 mile, the 2 mile, the 2 1/4 on, and get it timed, you're okay. I know motorcycle race. Well, first of all, the track is 50 yards or whatever it is wide, and big, fast cars will run right down the center of the track and chew the shit out of it. If you have a tall hood scoop and you can't see well on the right, then you tend to drive on the left side of the track out of those ruts to try and find smooth salt. If you don't have a big scoop, I recommend go to the right and ride along the right if you're not real fast and you're looking for smoother salt. I know motorcycle racers that cross the line and ride on the new side, the new course, till they come to the timing lights, come in, go through the lights, and go back outside. That's not against the rules. No one really notices whether you're in the lane unless you go through the lights and miss the lights or hit the lights.
I guess when you're 2 miles down, it's hard to see if you're in between this 20-foot marker or not.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no there's no out of bounds. You spin the car, you have to stop. I've seen guys come off the line, spin the car, and continue on. You will be in trouble when they get to you at the other end. If you spin, the run is aborted. There's a lot of rules. There's a mandatory rookie orientation that you have to go when you come to the line for the first time. You got a big R on your helmet, and the starter signs off on it. You got to bring your time slip back and have him sign after that, and you progress to the next level. Typically, it's 125, 150, 175, 200, and they move up in increments of 50 after that. If you have raced a lot in your life and you get there, somebody can champion you and get permission for you to run 150 or 175 for your first pass. And I know plenty of drag racers that have gotten them to do that for them. It helps to know someone, of course.
Hey guys, can we circle back on something for a minute? Joe, you touched on parachutes a little bit ago.
Yes.
And unfortunately or fortunately, I watched some of the 1320 video coverage of something called Texas 2K 2019, which most people on this might be familiar with. One of those videos started out with, unfortunately, some crash videos. One of those cars, a Supra, was pushing well over 200 in the quarter, and the car crashed beyond the quarter mile, and all the comments from the people coming up were saying the back of the car was lifted after he deployed the parachute, and from inside the car all he felt was something jerk when he applied the brakes. And it gets to this idea that you brought up about Bob Stroud, who I got an education from as well, about different chutes for different things, especially the nature of the speed involved and how the chute's going to deploy, how long it needs to be, what the size of the chute is. Exactly. I think there's a lot of people doing drag racing or now switching over to they're going to do roll racing or they're going to do half mile or they're going to do, ECTA, and they show up with completely the wrong chute.
And my opportunity of being the chief timer is I've gotten to witness somewhere between 35,000 passes. I don't know, 16 years, 700 passes a meet, 6 meets a year. Do the math. I mean, and I can watch a car and pull the chute and go, he's going to crash before he ever does. Bob Stroud's got a great website on it. He's got a chart that shows speed, and that's just for drag racing, and it's weight and speed. He incrementally, why I crashed is I had a super gas parachute on the Chevette. A super gas chute is to open between 135 and 150. That's it. And the car was way heavier than that chute should have. I was going 200 miles an hour, and it came out, and the aero made it go straight in the air, and it blossomed in the air. And when it went to pull it behind the car, there was 2 vortices from Skeggs on the back of this car, and it chose the left one, so it jumped 45 degrees over, picked the back of my car up and snapped it at a 45-degree angle, and I shot off the track and started to roll, went off the right side of the track and started to pitch roll to the left. I was very lucky. It didn't wreck the car, put a rocker panel on. We sold the car to build a new one. The object of a parachute in land speed racing is to stabilize the car so you can apply the brakes. At Bonneville, a lot of guys will use like a ribbon chute, and Bob has perfected one. It has Kevlar material. It holds up pretty well. Also, the angle of the chute, if you pull out the brochure, it tells you that the chute needs to be mounted at a 45-degree angle. The object is when you pull the parachute with just a spring will pop out about 3 feet or 4 feet, and the pop chute hangs there, and the car drives away from the pop chute. The pop chute, you have a bag, it'll strip it out of the bag, and then the parachute will open up and blossom. Sometimes it hits the ground. When you mount one, 90 degrees to the track, it comes out and plops right on the ground, and then you drag it whatever distance before it deploys. Typical, you're at tethers are at 40, 45, 50 feet in a land speed car because you want it way back behind the car. I tell people all the time in land speed racing, when you see the first speed trap, pull your parachute. I guarantee it's not going to blossom until you pass the finish line. Don't keep driving and try and drive into the chute because a lot of the tracks we run on are a little short. And with the weight that we have on cars, the extra weight for the traction, you run out of track quick, and you don't want a big chute. If you can fill a chute and it's tugging you and throwing you forward, it's too big for land speed racing. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. I just, it just jumped out at me today watching the videos of these guys crashing. And you could tell that, again, these were people who were losing cars after they were out of the throttle, not the usual staying in it too long when they should have got out and stuff. Lots of that. But these were guys who were losing it once they were already going through the lights, deploying the chute, hitting the brakes, and then suddenly they lost control of the car.
Yeah, one of the other things, too, that you see a lot is the chute's mounted to the back of the car too low. So it pulls up on the back of the car. A Lamborghini crashed in Texas really bad because he had it mounted underneath the car because he didn't want to drill a hole in his $50,000 bumper. It's the same thing in that Super. If they pulled the back tires off the ground, it could have been the right chute improperly mounted. The actual where the tether mounts to the car to pull back on it. Guys want to put it through the license plate hole because that's the best place to drill a hole so they don't have to drill through the back of their car. It's either a race car or street car. Take your pick. You got to put the chute mount where it's going to fall in the back of the car in the right direction so it doesn't put any upward leverage on the back of the car and pick the back end of the car up off the ground.
vertical center of gravity.
Bit is important.
Yeah.
The race car or street car, don't do both. There's a point where you have to decide.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second.
One of the things that I've found mounting parachutes is you want the parachute mount on the pitch rotation of the car. If you could stick a piece of tubing through the car, right through the center, and it's perfectly balanced to roll it around, that's where you want the chute mount. In a standard car, a small big block Chevrolet, it's around the camshaft height. That's about a great rule of thumb, and I don't vary much from that. If I do have a concern, I will corner away the car, jack the front end up, and corner away the car and do the math to find out where that center of gravity is up and down in the car. Just for weird, something really weird that I just don't know where it would be.
John wanted to touch on race car, street car.
No, I was actually, he just answered the question I was going to bring up. I said, let's talk about anchor point for a minute. What is the proper anchor point for a chute? How high is too high? How low is too low?
And that's why it's important to have a understanding of the center of gravity. I've built some cars for Bonneville that we knew we wanted in the 4,000 pound range, and I slapped a piece of 1/4 inch boilerplate, and that was the interior floor of the car to get all that heavy weight down low and between the tires, between the front and the back of the car. And we knew the car was going to have, a AA motor over 500 cubic inch, and it was going to have turbochargers. We knew this thing's going to be bloody fast. I built the roll cage in this car out of 2-inch 120 wall chromoly. It has the potential of going over 300 miles an hour easily. So, and that particular car, we did lower the chute down, and I work really close with Bob Stroud. Let me give you a background on Stroud. He's an Army Ranger. He jumped out of perfectly good everything while he was serving our country. He left there and went to work for a parachute manufacturing company and learned how to design parachutes and what worked and what didn't. And he was the test dummy. He then went to college and got a degree. He managed some company. He actually lived in Salisbury, Maryland for a good period of time running a corporation, much like I did, to gather the money to open his own business. And he chose Oklahoma for nice living, cheap labor rate, easy to get established. The city, I think, offered him something, and he went there. Bob is, I'm 68. Bob's 72, I guess. And he still jumps out of perfectly good airplanes. I trust a guy like that to build my parachute, honestly.
Well, and Strouds are known to be the softest opening, straightest pulling chutes you can get anyway.
Amen. And a lot of people make the switch from a Simpson. If I hear a chute pop and make that pop sound, it's too big for the car in land speed racing. And Michael will tell you that I gave him and his brother a real hard time over parachutes in the beginning. They kept going faster and faster, and I was cringing at the drag chute coming out every time. Not knowing he would be my son-in-law.
The other thing people need to know about a parachute is you need to learn how to fold it. You need to learn how to fold it properly. Stroud has videos online that explain exactly how to fold their chutes. You should practice it. Don't just do it once and assume that you're going to remember it when you get to the track. Pull the chute, pull the lever, go through everything. Practice your motions in the car of reaching the parachute and hitting the lever with your eyes closed. You may not be able to see. You might have to reach up and hit it to slow your car down and hopefully straighten it out. Do all those things.
That is,
you mean you don't just grab the chute and roll it up into a ball with the lanyards all crisscrossed and tied in circles and stuff it in like a
Hey, now
you can absolutely throw it up and
you can do that.
you can absolutely throw it into a ball, but it's not guaranteed to open up properly the next time you use it. So you got to learn how to really fold it, and there is a special way to do it.
I've packed a lot of chutes.
I know, but not all our listeners know.
Yeah. You don't pack your chute in January and then unpack it in December when you get done the racing season. If you're running and you don't use your parachute, I will guarantee you after a couple of months in that bag, you're anywhere where it's humid, you're going to pull the chute and it's going to come out like a brick and hit the ground and it's over. I don't know how many new guys come to Bonneville, pull the chute, collect all the salt, bring it back, shake it off, pack the chute, and go back to the hotel and come out next morning on a record return run, and they're dragging a cube down the track and it's just smacking and it never opens up because it's as hard as a rock. And I've seen plenty of drag racers, super comp, super gas racers, never use their chute, lose their brakes, pull the chute, and it's a streamer or it just comes out and bounces. And usually when they go into the sand or into the woods, the chute blossoms seconds before they hit. You should really pull your chute, if not every week, every other week, and repack it. Make sure, take it out, make sure it's not concrete. Maybe it needs to be hosed off.
Make sure the moths haven't gotten to it.
Yeah.
I mean, the chute.
Well, in the off season, you have to hang it out. Don't leave it bundled up, especially if you have a spring launcher and you didn't back off the spring and leave it compressed.
Yep.
So there's a whole set of behaviors around chutes and chute maintenance that people need to pay attention to. The other thing, and Scott, you kind of went there a little bit, but I want to correct this, is if you're heading toward the lights and something begins to go wrong, pulling the chute is fine, but don't rely on it to straighten you out or fix your shit. Because if you tried to drive out of something you shouldn't have, it's not going to deploy in time.
Or it's going to wrap around the car. Great. We see a lot of guys spin at Bonneville and they're already halfway around and pull the chute, and it just wraps around the car really nice, and I get to sell them another parachute. Let's talk about parachute prices for a second. You can go on Jegs and Summit and you look at these prices and you got a $200, $300, $400, $500 chute. What happens in land speed racing is they need a parachute. They just go buy one. I discount sell Stroud chutes, and a Bonneville chute from Stroud I sell for $711. That's a pretty pricey parachute. I'm already giving you, I think it's close to 13, 14% off. It's hand built, and it's built by a skilled person on a sewing machine. It's Kevlar. There's a lot of quality material that goes into that parachute. It has a very long tether before it gets to the chute itself. Super heavy duty. Not all the manufacturers that make land speed chutes have a product of the quality level that I get from Stroud. As you can tell, I'm a real Stroud fan.
I'm a big Stroud fan myself. I love his drag chutes.
When I crashed that car, I put the chute in a box and sent it to him, and he called me up a week later and said, "Joe, I got your chute, and I'm going to call you a name, and if you listen to me, I'll never have to call you that name again, but you're an effing asshole for running that chute." Yeah. So I said to Bob, "I think we're going to be friends, and what's it take to be a dealer?" And we worked a deal out on the phone, and that was 20 years ago, or more. So it was a good deal. Any more questions?
Touching on the SFI padding and the foam. Yes. Jason White is wondering if there's a service lifespan, maybe from sun exposure or weather. Like, is there a service life on that?
I would recommend, most of it gets real flaky after 5 years. I would get rid of it. If you're drag racing, 20, 30 times a season, after 3 years, I'd throw it away and get new, because you'll see it starts to crack along the edges. It'll tell you it's over. It's just like old tires. You'll see it in the foam.
And Eric Yost just commented, he wanted to say hi, and he said that they ran Maxton, and Joe and Keith helped him a ton. They set the record at 241 miles an hour, and you guys made sure he was safe, did it the correct way. He says thank you to both of you.
Great competitor, great guy, fantastic fabricator, and I believe that was in Dirty Bird.
Yep.
killer fast. He set the track record for that year. He did that. He was the fastest car at Maxton that year.
And he said the place where you're getting the foam from, he gets pour-in seat kits from them also.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. Yes, and ISP will also sell you a kit. The two great manufacturers to do business with.
So actually, while we're on that SFI foam, you were talking about some of the softer stuff you use, and just wondering, and just a note for people that are looking at softer stuff. This goes back to that pool noodle tip foam too. What are you using that's actually going to hold up in a fire? Because that's a problem with a lot of the soft stuff. It's all polystyrene, and when there's a fire, that stuff just turns to basically lava that's going to stick to your skin and burn anything it gets close to in about 10 seconds. So is there stuff out there that's a little bit better? I know some of the BCSI stuff claims it won't drip, but what's out there that's a decent fire protection that's kind of something soft?
The stuff that's SFI rated is the good stuff.
So the softer stuff you are using is SFI?
Yes. Okay. It's just not the durometer that they're requiring for roll cage padding. It's softer as a cushion, yes, but it's the same material. It's just aerated more. There's more. It's closed cell foam. I mean, and there's open cell foam, and there's more air in it to make it softer.
Yeah. Because that's one thing, like you can go on jigs, and I've had people come through tech when we've done tech for some road course and drift stuff, and they'll say, oh, well, that's roll bar padding, but you take a lighter to it, it's just polystyrene foam. It doesn't have any kind of SFI rating. And that's one thing that we've always had a problem with. And
that's that 6 mile an hour crap.
Exactly. Yeah. And
pool noodles.
Exactly. And
exactly. Yeah. Pool noodles. Yeah. Float in the pool with them. Don't put them in your race car.
Home Depot.
You know what those
piping insulation?
You know what those are good for? You know what that's good for? The cables for the door of your trailer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So you don't trip over.
Get orange because I've walked into black before.
So Brandon wants to know if you feel there's a point where you should just put one on the car if you can afford it, referring to parachutes. He says he knows what NHRA says, which of course is 150 miles an hour, but he was wondering if in your opinion, should you put it on before that if you can afford to do it?
If you ran through the lights at 135 and your brakes were weak, you could probably, if you have an emergency brake, you could probably get the car wound down and be fine. At below 135, 145 miles an hour, the parachute's really not going to do a whole bunch for you. I feel, 160, I really noticed the difference of pulling the chute if you had to. I've had instances of bouncing through the lights in my super comp dragster and just pull the chute instead of continue to bounce and not put the brakes on or try and ride it out. Just pull the chute. Don't wait. And I hear people say, well, if it does that, just floor it and it'll straighten it out. No, you've crossed the finish line. You need to be in the deacceleration mode. A parachute's not going to do much for you at 135. I think you need a little more than that. 125, 135 is probably the threshold. It won't even, some chutes won't even blossom at a slower speed. There isn't enough wind blowing across them to make them open up.
Wouldn't you have to use a launcher of some kind, either a pneumatic or a spring, to even make that deploy at those speeds?
The pop spring will move it out, but generally at that speed, it just bounces and drags on the track. So it's a matter of, is it going to open enough to catch the air? And probably not. You're probably going to have a streamer.
I would like to tell a quick parachute story before we go.
Yes.
We were doing NSSR snowmobile racing, which is akin to land speed, but it's on shaved ice. And
yes.
a 1,000 foot track. So not it's along the lines of drag racing, but it's mile per hour based.
Okay.
And we were running an open mod 800, which is an 800cc sled. It weighed 295 pounds without the rider and made 231 horsepower at 10,300 RPM.
Yes.
It would run 143 miles an hour and 1,000 feet. And as per NSS, well, and this is back in the late 90s, they're a lot faster now, but per NSSR rules, any 800cc open mod had to have a parachute on the sled. The 1000cc's had to have a parachute on the sled and on the rider, and the idea was that if you got ejected from the sled, there's a tether that would pull the chute, and it would straighten the sled out and slow it down. And one such occasion, our rider got off the sled, and there's probably, the fences lined with spectators and everything. And he had just run 140 plus miles an hour and 1,000 feet, and shuts the sled down, and he gets off and he walks away, and he saw the entire crowd, saw their heads go up, around, and back down. And he had forgotten to unhook the tether, and the chute launched as he was walking away from the sled.
Oh my God. Before we go, I do want to touch on fire systems.
Oh, yes.
Over the last 25 years, I've become a pretty good expert in fire systems. I want to talk about our early fire systems in race cars used halon. Halon is one of the best agents there ever was, bar none, for putting a fire out and keeping a fire out. The government, of course, banned halon because of environmental issues, and it forced manufacturers to find other products. DuPont championed the FE36 environmental friendly gas. That's a joke. It's a refrigerant, and people have to understand what that means. It will put a fire out. It's nowhere as good as halon. It tends to be a lighter gas, and it'll blow away, and you can have reignition. The bad part is it decomposes at 400 degrees. And at that point, when it decomposes, it becomes a hydrogen fluoride. And if you read the MSDS sheets, it's about page 39 or 40 when they tell you this. And then a couple pages before, they tell you 400 degrees. And if you go look up what hydrogen fluoride is, in an elevated temperature, it will remove all the anodizing in your fittings in your engine compartment. It will take your sheet metal valve covers and make them look like they have the mumps. If you have the unfortunate situation of breathing that in, it can burn your throat and your lungs. I've heard of autopsies where they said, well, he died, he breathed fire. But his lips weren't burned, nothing else was burned. And more than likely it was this gas, and it can't be proven or disproven. It's a product that's out there that puts our fire out. What you have to be aware of is you need to build an interior that is completely sealed, nothing through the firewall. If you're using that product, understand the product, understand what we're doing. There is a new product out called that 3M makes, and it's not as efficient as FE36, but it degrades at 500 degrees, but you have the same problem. NHRA loves it because it evaporates before it ever hits the track. The other systems that are available is an aqueous system. Some of them just put soapy water in a bare aluminum container and pressurize it, and with nitrogen. Generally, the issues are how you mount the tank is critical, that the little siphon tube is down in the bottom. It's got to be slightly up from level with the ground, and set in a way that it allows the siphon tube to be able to dispense the product. The problem with it is the nitrogen is smaller molecules than the water that's in it. And you generally get more nitrogen out of the bottle, and I'll guarantee you're going to have some amount of your product left in the bottle. It won't 100% disperse the product. I've learned all these lessons the hard way, but I now work with a company that builds fire bottles with a bladder in them, and the product is in the bladder, and it's a foam product that's used at airport runways to foam the runways. And then nitrogen is put in the bottle around that, so it compresses the bladder, and it has a spring that runs through the center of the bladder, so that as the bladder crushes around the spring, you're still getting the product out, and it's 100% dispersion of the product. The bottles can be mounted upside down, backwards, sideways. They're always going to work. Foam is an interesting product because not only does it cool, it also takes the oxygen out of the air with the foam, and it'll foam the engine and run down. So there's a cooling effect and there's a smothering effect. It doesn't blow away, so reignition isn't a problem. They're the things that are out there in the marketplace today that are available. My point to racers is you need to work on your safety systems as diligently as you work on your engines and you work on your race cars. An SFI 20 fire suit means 40 seconds to second degree burns on your body. So you need to dress for the crash, not for the ride. You have to dress for the fire, not to look good. I've seen these different instances where guys are racing, their face shields are up. They won't pull the fire system because they're going to save it, or it costs a lot of money to refill it. And, racing without gloves. You can't get out of a car without gloves on. If you had a bad fire, everything's going to be hot you touch. I do a fire seminar at the races, and the first question I ask people is, do you need your hands and your feet to work every day? Do you use them? And the answer is yes across the board. And I've seen people race in sneakers. I've seen people race without gloves. I won't do it. I'm a fan. I was burned once on the ankle where my fire suit pulled up off of my hot top shoes, and I got a little raspberry on my ankle. I wear funny car boots. I'm a chassis builder. I'm scarred everywhere from burns. I don't like burns. I don't like bad burns. So I'm dressing for the deal here. I thought it was important to touch on the fire systems and let you know what's going on. And they're the products that are out there. We can't have halon. We're stuck with these other products. You need to be aware of what can happen. If you're slow to get out of a car, maybe you want to think about some breathable air to your helmet. There's a lot of different things you can do. Seal the cockpit. Think about all the seals in the motor, air, the motor, the firewall. Inside, I've seen guys with, if they had a fire in the engine compartment, it comes around the fiberglass and goes right inside the front of the doors. And flames and smoke and parts can come right inside the car. There's no sealant. So you need to think about those things.
One of our friends of the show is Lyle Barnett, who unfortunately sustained a very bad fire.
Wow. Yeah. I was thinking of him when I was talking about the whole time.
Yeah. And he is now, as you might imagine, way on top of this stuff, so that even at the recent last year's $10,000 drag race challenge, he and Eric and the team were making sure that even on that, what some people would refer to as a garbage car, everything around the firewall and everything was sealed up, with good reason.
I watched the little video that he did, and my hat's off to him. And you need more high-profile people like that speaking out and telling the truth. And you won't find anybody that'll just tell you the information about these fire systems. And I've sold every kind there is. I don't sell anything but the unit that I sell today, Firefox. I truly believe that's is the best product out there for what we're doing. Lee Cecilio has bought over 20 bottles from me over the years, and he has 4 in his Dodge Daytona. And I said, "You don't need 4." And he said, "I'd rather drown than burn." And that sticks in my mind all the time.
Yeah, if nobody's ever been in a fire, it's crazy how fast it goes from this tiny little thing you think you can control to this massive thing that gets through every tiny little gap you never thought even existed.
Amen. Amen.
I've been in 2, and that's too many.
When we get done a car, I'll put a couple lamps in the under the hood and close the hood and throw a blanket up over the car and climb in it and look and see if we're sealed. Bonneville's a bitch. They do that. They check all those things, and you have to close your eyes and touch everything in it, and you have to do a bailout, or you're not racing at Bonneville. You have to do a bailout out of the car.
What's the time limit on Bonneville on that on a egress?
There is no set time.
Okay.
What we look is how fluid the person is. If the guy, I say, you're going 200 miles an hour, the car just blew up, what do you do? And they take their seatbelt off and drop the window net and climb out. I said, really? No, go back in the car. Listen to what I said. I want you to fire system, shut the ignition off, push the clutch, neutral. And I want you leave the face shield up and yell out what you're doing. I want to see that you've walked through these steps, because that's not undoing the seatbelt and opening the door is not doing a bailout.
That's a good point.
And I want your eyes closed when you're touching the components. You can open your eyes when you come to the window net and the door. That's it.
I tell everybody that they should practice their whole car with their eyes closed or a blindfold on for just that reason. You might not be able to see anything.
Yeah, we used to blindfold guys, and even in Formula cars, they're small, but they're so tight that you think you know where everything is, and it's small, but everything's so close, you may not know what's what. So we used to blindfold guys and do their egress test and shut down completely blindfolded.
When they introduced mandatory Hans devices at Bonneville, you wouldn't believe the old guys when we said, we want you to do a bailout, and how it would catch on the roll cage, or they just freaked out because it was something they've never done before and they never practiced it.
It's such a simple thing to practice that can make a huge difference in saving your life. It's silly.
But this is something that the organizations don't push, and you don't hear the education about it. So that's my, I want you all to be around and race your whole life and grow old and,
that's our point. We got a lot of pushback when we started pushing safety, especially in the drift world. There was a lot of people getting upset about it. And we're like, look, we don't want to see. We got lucky. We had only minor injuries, and we put containment seats, we put Hans devices and anti-intrusion bars, which weren't required in some Pro-Am series don't require it. And it's like, look, these are simple things. We don't want to see anybody get hurt. We don't want to see a track get shut down. We don't want to see anyone die and not come back and race with us next year. So, go spend a few $100s to save your life or whatever. Because even at this point, you can pick up a Hans for under $300. That's a solid device.
Yes.
It's just,
my point. I was the president of the East Coast Timing Association for over 10 years. I've buried racer friends on my watch. That feeling doesn't go away for a long time. And I've also run back in the woods and pulled somebody out, and, he was gone when I got there. And that took a lot of months of not waking up in the middle of the night and seeing him there.
Yeah,
it's a tough deal, babe.
That'll never go away. And listen to the people that have been through that, because I've done the same thing, and it never goes away. It stays with you for the rest of your life. You learn to deal with it, but it never goes away. And I don't want to see anybody else do that. I don't want to ever have to do that if it can be avoided.
Yes, exactly.
One thing I tell everybody all the time, and my brother and I do it every time. Every time we get done making a pass, we bail out of that car like it's on fire. You get out of the car, you make all those passes all year long. you should get out like it's on fire. Like you're in an emergency situation. That way it's just second nature. I mean, you'll see me sitting at the line. If you watch our in-car videos, when I'm sitting there before I take off, I go, my right hand goes from steering wheel to shifter to one parachute, second parachute, first, second, all in a row. I do it like 3 or 4 times before we even head down the track. And then as soon as that car comes to a stop, it's the bailout procedure, like the car's on fire. I jump out of the thing like it's on fire every single time. And you just got to do that. So, it's just second nature, there's nothing holding you back from doing it. It's free time to do bailouts. You're going to come to a stop. You got to get out of the car. You might as well just do a bailout. Just get out as fast as you possibly can. And that way, if you have any problems, if something's going to get caught, you may do it 10 times and one time something may get you hung up. I know in the Maxton days before I had cam lock seatbelts, I bailed out of that car 10 times. The 11th time, the seatbelt latch was jammed and it wouldn't come off. Talk to Joe, figure out need a little grease on it, need to run a file over the edges so to get rid of the sharp edges. And, after that happening a couple times, just decided, I'm going to buy some cam lock seat belts. But, it's something I would never have known or never had to worry about unless I had bailed out of that car every single time. And, it's free time to do it. You're going to make a pass. You're going to get out of the car. You might as well get out like it's on fire.
Good point, Michael. Thank you.
Great points.
Yeah, jumping back a second to seatbelts, Michael brings up a good point. I'm a cam lock guy. I like them. We get cam locks. They're $180. They're a really good quality belt. We can get them with the 2-inch shoulders for Hans. We can get them with double. We can get them with pull-ups, which I love pull-ups in the waist. You can tighten yourself up so much easier. And the other thing I want to point out is the manufacturer shows the seatbelt going down through your crotch, through a hole in the seat, not around the front of the seat. The mount for the crotch belt needs to be in line with your spine. It's keeping you from submarining forward, which loosens your shoulder belts and allows you to project further out of the seat. And it gives you, it gives you more speed, which if you're not wearing a Hans device, helps in the fracture of your neck from your head. And if you are wearing a Hans device, the Hans device can pull up on you and not work properly. Having seatbelts fastened properly and tight. The other thing is the shoulders. When they go over your shoulders, the mount needs to be 2 to 4 inches below the top of your shoulders. If they're too high, again, you can rise up in the seat, put your helmet in closer proximity to the roof and the roll cage of the car. If they're too low, what actually happens when they're all the way down, like say 8 or 10 inches behind you, you can actually roll forward and the seatbelt will roll up on your shoulder and you can come almost out of the seat. The skid test videos that Chris Vandergelt at ISP shows those things happening. You really need to follow the manufacturer's rules on it. If they're not right, change them.
That's one thing you mentioned the manufacturer's rule, and that's one. That's one thing I wanted I was going to ask about your opinion on angles and touch on that because I think we were always like +10, -20 or something like that in the formula world. But there's some manufacturers out there that are saying up to plus or -45 is okay on their street harness applications, and that's one thing that's always really bugged me because that's a pretty extreme low angle that I was always taught, at least, that's way too low.
Yes, I agree with you there. If multiple people are driving the car, here's 2 choices. Put multiple crossbars for the belts to go over behind the seat. Make sure the seat isn't deflecting the seat belt. That's another thing, that the holes in the back, if they need to be bigger, make them bigger. The belt should not come up over the seat and come down on you, period. Can't happen. And then wear your belts tight. Tighten them up nice and tight. You're dressing for the ride, not for the crash.
Yeah, it's coming back to like the street car race car thing too. I see guys that want to do both, and my road race car, it's a Miata. It's nothing special, and it's just got a roll bar, but it has a racing and a 5 or 6 point harness in it. That thing sucks to drive on the street. I do it every now and then. I don't like to do it. I tighten the belts all the way. I sit in it right to be safe, and it just makes it a pain in the ass to drive.
I bet.
Things about it. And that's with just a 4 point roll bar. That's not even a full cage.
Yeah.
Well, the cage won't have a great deal of effect on how your belts are anchored or where you sit.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's more that's just more things to rattle your head off of or your elbow or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, if you're driving a car on the street that's got bars around your head, you want to think about restraining yourself. I know people think I'm weird for having a full containment seat in my drag week car, but it's got a funny car cage because it can go quick enough to need it. And so I have a containment seat, and I've got pads, and I've got all the other stuff. Actually had Turk look at it because it's going to go land speed racing. But, I feel much more comfortable. And I wear the 6 point driving down the road. Do I tighten it up quite as much? Probably not as much as I should, but I have everything on because I don't want to bounce my head off anything. In the event that some idiot hits me, because that's what happens, unfortunately.
Yep.
Yeah, so coming from motorcycles, that's what we always said was dress for the slide, not for the ride. And
that's
that's
all right, guys.
I think we should
go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, I think we've learned a lot, and it's getting awful late for some of us. This has been a great night talking to you, Joe. It's always good to hear lots of safety stuff, and all of us, I'm sure we all feel the same way that safety is super important as making the car go fast, if not more important than making the car go fast.
One of the things I'll leave you with is when it comes to car safety, would you put your wife or your mother or your daughter or your son in the car and send them down the track? That's a great question. Every racer needs to ask himself when he's climbing in his car.
All right. That's awesome. I like that one.
Scott, thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
On, Joe. It was really nice to meet you and listen to your stories.
I hope to see you at the track or on the stall.
Cool.
If any of you decide to go land speed racing, call me up. I'll help you through the whole process. I do that for everybody.
Cool beans. Don't forget to check them out on Facebook. Delaware Racing, Delaware
Chassis.
Delaware Chassis. Delaware Chassis. On Facebook, you can find him. I know he's got a website that's having some issues right now because of some changes in his service there. So just hit him up on Facebook, and thanks for coming. Everybody, thanks for listening again this week. We'll see you guys again next week. Everybody have a Do you want to learn how to tune electronic fuel injection live in person with the guys from RealTuners? We have 2-day courses in dyno shops all across the country. You can register for these at RealTuners.com and click on RealTuners Live Classes. For more information or to make a reservation, go to RealTuners.com or message us on Facebook at RealTuners LLC. Now, about those classes. When are they, you might ask? March 30th and 31st, late model Dodge and Mopar factory ECU tuning with Rick Tapp in Dallas-Fort Worth. April 13th and 14th, a level 1 EFI course at Endless Performance in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. April 27th and 28th, an advanced class at 417 Motorsports in Springfield, Missouri. May 18th and 19th, a standalone EFI Level 1 class at 417 Motorsports in Springfield, Missouri. June 15th and 16th, a Level 2 advanced course in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at Endless Performance. And of course, we will be trying to schedule more classes and more dates throughout the year, so keep checking back for more info. And remember, don't forget to have your host spayed or neutered.